you a woman in medicine feeling overwhelmed and disconnected from the personal fulfillment that you desire? You're in the right place. Join Doctors Joanne and Aaron as they rewrite the rules for women in medicine. Let's begin.
Welcome to Create Meaning in Medicine. And today we are recording part 2 of the Power of Reflections, Lessons Learned. As we transition out of one year and start the other one, we want to start with our best selves, really pausing to think of what was great during the year, what were some challenges, how did we grow, what were some lessons learned, and then think of what are some things that we want to leave behind and what things we want to really take and move forward with. This is why this work matters. We pause, we reflect, we get curious, and from there, we just get stronger and we move forward with more power. So I shared some of my lessons in the last episode. So if you haven't listened to that one, you can right after you listen to this one. A lot of good nuggets there. And in this episode, I am going to get curious with Erin, and we can all learn from some of her lessons. So, Erin, let's go straight to it. So, tell me, why is it important for you to reflect and pause and really look at this lesson?
For so much of my life, I didn't. And I remember when I started being coached myself, when I started going to different personal growth and development conferences, two things happened. Number one, when I met with my coach weekly, I furiously took notes. And of course, there were lessons learned in those sessions with my coach. But the power of going back and looking at my notes weeks and months past, that was where the footprint of where I had started and where I was going. And I could say, oh my gosh, 6 weeks after I started working with my coach, I started leaving the office 2 to 4 hours earlier. How do I know that? Because it is documented in the notes I took in my journal. And had I not taken time to go back and look, I would have never learned what was possible. After 2 decades of doing medicine one way, I had a pivot working with my coach. Now huge changes in just 6 weeks. So there's power in taking time to look back, because you don't always know. You don't always remember how far you've come. So that's one. And I think when we look back, we also have the power of time, where your subconscious is exposed to what's going on in real time. And then you've had time to process it underneath the surface, not just your intellectual thinking brain, but subconsciously, and kind of let it marinate with all the other experiences in your life. And then in hindsight, when you go back to reflect, you may have a completely different lesson than you did in the moment. And again, you may completely miss that ability if you don't take time to pause and reflect. And you can amplify that result when you take Joanne's lesson learned in journal. People, it is so powerful to give you that footprint and the path that you've been on in the journey, because the journey is just as important, if not more so, than the destination that you're at right now.
This is so cool. Something that comes to mind is, even though this is a little bit of a tangent, but there's a saying of you can't improve what you don't measure. And it's usually true for things that are a little bit more concrete. But I just love that because you took notes, maybe you didn't sit in the moment as the cheesy journaling that I talk about. You're very typical, maybe let's call it little nerdy self in your coaching. I love it when my clients take notes, because I'm like, yes, it's like getting wired in the brain a little differently. And you took the time to look back, which is like so next level, that you took the notes and then you went back to review them. And the other thing that comes to mind is, even if it's just a day after that you go back and you reflect, you're a different person already. And maybe the mindset, whatever your brain is doing, whatever part of your brain is activated in the middle of whatever it's going on, right? Like Erin is saying, a coaching session, it's a different part of your brain that's activated when you're calmer, when you're more insightful, when you're taking time for reflection, and you might see things a little bit different. So, I mean, I just love the whole process. It's like new formula for getting even more out of coaching sessions. And this is true also for life experiences. You don't necessarily have to go and write them. It's just the reflection of them afterwards.
And even when you're going to CME, I remember again another mentor of mine, Ethan Willis, who I met through working with Brendan Burchard at one of the very first live conferences. And I was looking at joining this mastermind group, paying a bunch of money to be in part of this select group. And he said, "You should be looking at your notes from this conference every day for the next 3 weeks." And I thought, who has time for that? And yet I had just spent, I think it was a 3 day conference, and I was going to lose most of that learning if I didn't go back and reflect on my notes. So, same thing if you're doing continuing medical education, if you're doing something that's important, if you don't now integrate that into how you practice medicine, into how you communicate, into whatever it is you're learning about, you just wasted time by spending time in the lesson, but not then concreting it into your new way of being. And in order to do that most effectively, you have to go back and revisit your notes.
Yep, says the doctor. We got to listen.
And the other thing, when I shared about, okay, in 6 weeks, I had significantly changed how late I was staying at the office, saving 2 to 4 hours a day, coming home early. The power of reflecting on my notes, I also found that it took me 18 months from the time I committed to my coach, I'm going to go to yoga class. It was a full 18 months later before I finally followed through and went to my first yoga class. So it also can help you clarify, where are you talking about doing something and taking no action, and then deciding, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to give up on going to yoga class, or am I going to double down and say, okay, no, really, this is the week I'm going to go?
Yes, yes, yes. So much greatness there. And I love that this is our part two, and we're already digging into different levels of this topic and how important that is. And Erin, I'm super, super curious. What are your top 3 lessons? So in finishing one year and starting the next.
My biggest lesson of this past year is this mantra: I can do hard things. And um, that hits on many levels. And we were sharing in the last episode, Joanne and I earlier today, were on a call with our coach and mentor, Brendan Burchard, in this mastermind. And we broke out into small groups, and we each shared some of our reflections on the year. And lots of people have had real big struggles. And as I think about some of the biggest struggles for me, I have a son who joined the military. There's a risk of him getting deployed. He's living away from home. There's so many things out of my control. And that just happened earlier this year, him getting signing up for the military. My husband took on a new job. He retired from his regular job as a city firefighter. And with that job, he was gone about a third of the time, sometimes a little bit longer. And with this new job, it's seasonal, but he's been gone probably 90% of the time for the past 6 months. And so I'm used to him being gone a third of the time, but not 90% of the time. So that's just had a big impact. And how can we have a strong relationship? How can we, keep things going around the house, me owning more of the things? How are we going to manage? And so that's been hard. And yet I am confident I can do hard things. And then I had a traumatic event, physically traumatic, over the summer, and just realized that I can be tough as nails when I need to be, and that I know I'm going to fully recover. And I'm well on my way to doing that. And we'll get to number 3, why I've been able to recover so well from that. So
And
that's number 1. I can do hard things.
and sorry, interrupting. And what I also hear is that also gives you intentionality. You're showing up with a different level of consciousness, which then translates into a different presence for yourself, for those around you. You talked about your son and your husband, and then the ripple effect that it creates with everyone else around you. And then the empowering of I can do hard things. And I love what you said, that if it gets, I'll rephrase that, if it gets hard, I can do it, I'll recover. And then I'll add because I know you, the knowing, and there's time for rest and time to unwind. That it's not, sometimes we hear these messages of empowerment as women as if we just have to hustle like all the time. And that's not the message, right? Like that's
Without the grit and grind, yeah. And for myself, that meant actually almost 2 full months of rest and recovery, for myself this summer, where we weren't recording our podcast, where I wasn't creating workshops, where I was very dormant in a lot of things because I knew in order for me to recover, I knew I could get through it, but I had to do it in a way that wasn't just grind through, that a healthier manner was going to be take ultimate care of myself and ask for help in order to get through that. So yeah, I can get through hard things with the help of my friends. So, and with that, I'm going to bump number 3 up to number 2 and talk about community. And as Joanne said, I interviewed her on her reflection for the past year, and your golden nugget, one of the many that I wrote down, was community and connection are non-negotiable. And I can't agree more, so I had to bring that one in. That community is I went without community for so long. I gave up on getting together with my girlfriends because everything was about work or family. And over the last 8 years, I've recultivated my relationships with friends and especially my girlfriends, and invited people into my life like Joanne, who have added so much beauty. And there's just nothing like having an amazing girlfriend or 2 or 3 or 5. And you just don't get that kind of relationship and support from other people. And I totally agree that now that I've added friends and community back into my life so that I have people to ask for help, and I can do it without guilt or without feeling bad. And I ask actually for help more often than I used to, that having my community is non-negotiable. My husband knows I'm going to be going on several trips a year. I'm going to be connecting with I call them my work wives, my girlfriends that I've met in my personal growth, and that for me also is non-negotiable. So I'm stealing Joanne's language with that, but community is so essential to my success.
yes. And I've heard you talk about it so often. And again, and it's an important message because we both hear this from other women physicians that we're programmed to be lone rangers and just figure things out on our own and never need help. And there's room for that strength, I guess, the knowing that we can figure things out on our own. And then also saying, what's a shoulder I can lean on? Where do I need help? How can I voice it? And then also, where can I have fun with friends? And when can I just be my authentic self and share and have ideas together and grow? And it's, I think a lot of us miss out on the magic that comes from that. And I'm so happy that you're part of my tribe.
Well, and I was able to find this journal. So this, if you're watching the YouTube version or the visual version, so this is a growth day journal that I got at one of the in-person events. And while I was sitting there at the conference, furiously taking notes, I also started thinking about the community that I've built since I started doing my personal growth and development journey. And so if you can see, this entire page is full of names. And some of them are that Joanne is on here. I think I highlighted her. She's definitely on here. And because I met Joanne, Joanne introduced me to Lauren Lahav. And because I met Lauren Lahav, I met Aini Getahun, who has a nonprofit that I volunteer for. And because I met Aini, I met this person. So the ripple effect of my community, it's exponential. Each one person in my community has expanded my ability to connect with others. And I have this entire page full of individuals that have enriched my life. And hopefully, maybe I've